I worked with a separate girls group and a boys group here last year, and they were 11-year-olds. It was a transition course. It was looking at going into secondary school and rites of passage. And what I noticed was the boys were very, very efficient at, say, shelter building and knowing who was going to do what, when, and how to get that shelter up effectively and efficiently. The girls were far more interested in what the shelter would look like inside. And some of them would turn up with like some greenery. I'd say, what's that for? Well, it's for the inside, but you haven't built the shelter yet. And it was really interesting because I'd be the first to say, I can do just what a man can do. But it was really interesting seeing gender differences. And it made me think, okay, how can we work together more? Today, we've had a situation where we've had a whole class and we've had boys against girls quite aggressively with shelter building. Now, how it was resolved with the Year 6 children, it was quite interesting because I said to the boys, look, you've got skills that the girls need, and I think the girls have got skills that you need. And they ended up working on the same shelter at different times. And they taught each other's skills as well and what their interests were. And it was incredible because it was a real fusion of feminine and male energy. And respect.
Did they both accept it?
Totally.
There was one word that jumped out when you said fusion. When I just think that is just such a key word of like if we could fuse together, create a fusion of our male and female energies and work together.
Something you said earlier, Catherine, about rites of passage. I think that is an absolute vital time in a child's life, and the education system could go a lot further. Well, I don't think it goes anywhere for rite of passage at the moment, and I think there's a lot of analysis and understanding that's needed about what happens to both genders during that rite of passage, and how can we ease that transition and meet the needs and ensure that they come out the other side of that being confident young adults as well. I mean, I've worked a lot in dance and drama, and I can see girls at the age of sort of 10, 11 years old being expansive in their bodies, proud, strong, climbing trees, running around, using their energy and their bodies in a certain way. They hit 13, 14 and their bodies go. Their body language is like this, and maybe when you're interviewing your 8, 9-year-olds earlier and saying, and you're going to be head of the UN, you're going to be a doctor, maybe that was true and how they felt, and they were rising within themselves and it all felt possible, and perhaps then they hit their rite of passage and everything shrunk slightly, and maybe they never actually learnt how to expand again after that. And that's just talking about the girls. The boys, you know, they hit a rite of passage, and anger and confusion, where does that go? Who's there to help them understand that? I think that is a crucial age, and education research is really needed in that area.
Within our work with forest schools, rites of passage, the fire, putting out fire ceremoniously, all that sort of thing we always do within forest schools, which is why the nature movement is so valuable.
Much more valuable than sitting in front of a computer, isn't it, and learning how to use a mouse.
Yes.
Children do that at a certain age. And I think that, you know, going back to the education and children, I think that they should do a lot more physical activities in schools, a lot more PE, not just half an hour once a week. You talk about, I mean, my children, they come home from school and they go on their trampoline and they scream their heads off, and my mum says, oh God, tell them to be quiet. So they need it, they have to be, they're so disciplined at school, they can't talk, they're restricted in the playground, they don't play as much sport as they should, they need to come home and they need to release. And I think particularly with the problems with boys, you know, if there was a lot more PE, a lot more sports, a lot more, you know, tackling contact in sport, then boys would feel more masculine and they wouldn't feel frustrated.
I have a stepson who's now in Year 6, and he's really struggling with writing. And I was talking to him the other day about learning writing in PE, and he actually said he thought it was a really good idea, and it was something that we talked about at work. Just making that, because he relates writing to having to sit still, having to do something incredibly arduous, that's really hard, and he's now convinced himself that writing isn't important, you don't really need to write anyway. So just relating and crossing those things over from your question of are schools doing what they need to do, I just think there are shifts and there are things happening, but it's still the fundamental thing of still having to wear the same clothes, to sit and talk the same speak, and the whole sort of essence of uniform goes totally against self-expression, which is what you were talking about.
Yes.
Learning to express yourself is not encouraged in school, I don't think. Get more in primary, but certainly in secondary it's not the done thing. I think it's frowned upon. I think it's...
Do you think that's to do with conformity of children as
Yeah,
well?
I think it has to be for the masses that go through such a system. The only way it can be contained, if you like, is by that.
Children need to learn rules and boundaries because in life, in the workplace, there are rules and boundaries.
There aren't uniforms though. I've never really understood that. There aren't uniforms at work, but
I've worked in secondary schools and in high schools, in all of them actually. And thank you. And the teachers spend inordinate amounts of time trying to get the ones that are expressing themselves into the school uniform.
there's so much energy is spent having to sort of drill that down, and this sort of I've seen it the same.
And the argument goes, okay, well, it's an equaliser, but it's not.
Girls are a lot more privileged, that's the wrong word. They have a lot more opportunities in some ways in the early years. It suits them better. And boys get very angry by by the time they're 8 or 9, if they're not getting those grades, they don't want to read, they don't want to write, they're frustrated, they're angry. The female teachers are, you sit on the carpet and you do as you're told, and you have to write and you have to read, obviously, but they don't harness that masculine energy. And it is a concern.
Do you think that's because teachers are mainly female?
Yes, I do in primary. And a lot of us female teachers don't respect.
It's also not set up for what you're talking about.
It's not. It
Just take into consideration the difference between boys and girls. And I just feel really strongly that education doesn't address the fact that we learn through physical activity, we learn through doing as much as we learn through thinking. And I agree that there's just not enough physical, not just sport, but dancing, acting, being movement.
Dance club, because the dance teacher couldn't control the children because she was trying to discipline them to such an extent that if they didn't sit still and do exactly what she wanted, that she stopped the dance group. So they all lost out, even the ones who were behaving themselves. Teacher as well. And if they don't stand in line and do exactly what they're told to do and stand there and be silent, then they're all marched straight back in again and have to get changed back into their school uniform. So they miss all the whole class because they're out on their their half-hour slot of PE once a week that they're supposed to get.
That's ridiculous.
Infuriating.
I mean, that's an example of the wrong type of leadership. A dictator leadership isn't called for in that kind of situation.
They're children. They're 5, 6 years old. They're exuberant. That's their nature.
Run around and play music and just let them be.
When I did my dance teacher training, we were taught about leadership. That's why that's one of my subjects that I'm interested in, and how different types of leadership are required for different situations, different types of dance classes, different age groups, and sometimes you need to lead in ways that are unexpected, that are going to grab the group's attention, not just dictate.
However, I think that teaching children, we have to say, is a extremely difficult job, and respect to anybody who can do it.
Thank you.
Because I did a course teaching children yoga, and I couldn't do it. It's,
Gentle
take my
discipline
hats off.
is a skill, definitely, isn't it?
Yes.
A lot of it comes through humour. I think when teachers are able to use humour, they get a lot of respect from young people as well.
as well, after a conversation you and I had yesterday, actually, I'm a learning mentor, so I do a lot of work one-to-one for year 10s and year 11s, and I found myself, having worked for nearly 2 years in schools, that school mentality is really rubbing off on me, and that I'm having to toe the party line. And I realised actually what had happened is I'd kind of lost my authenticity of how I connect with young people. And just after a conversation Liz and I had yesterday, I totally realised what had been going on, and I dropped it completely, and it's totally transformed the relationships with my mentees again. It's gone back to where it was, which is just, open and natural and honest, and not trying to be the party line
And it must be really difficult for teachers, I think, that are constantly in one school and feel that they have to adhere to the rules all of the time, because you lose that sense of what's magic about working with people, which is your true self, and it gets lost, and it's
That was
horrible.
our starting point today, isn't it?
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Being your true self.
Being honest with ourselves.
Yeah. I think it's so important. And actually,
And you gain respect, don't you, as well? You feel more respect towards yourself, and you're gaining it from whoever you're mentoring.
yeah.
Also, that we were talking about vulnerability. So when you work with young people, you know, it's okay to say, do you know, I don't know the answer to that. You know,
Let's
or
find
do you
out
know,
together.
I was like that when I was young. I felt sad, and I had a family that didn't love me, and any of those things that, you know, we can share with young people. It's exposing your vulnerability, which is where we started this morning.